the dishonesty of the Conservative Party when we were in government. I don't think the people rejected conservatism at the last election. I think the British people are at least relatively conservative with a small c. I think what they rejected was a certain stench associated with the Conservative Party. We did not look like good people. We did not behave well towards each other, and we did not behave well often in office. And so Tom is probably a little bit more to the left of me than some of the other candidates. I'm probably closer
most people are
someone like... Pardon?
Most people are, Tim.
Oh, you naughty boy. But I think it matters that we have a good person at the top of the party, someone who basically the country can look at and see a decent man. And so Tom, for me, is my choice.
Welcome back to Church. Ed Vaizey on Times Radio, and I'm still with the Times columnist Libby Purvis and the founder of Conservative Home, Tim Montgomerie. And I said before the break that we were going to talk about the Tory leadership contest because Tim pointed out that Robert Jenrick has been making some noises about the role of the state. But the story that's in the papers today is this poll that shows that James Cleverly, the former Home Secretary, is the most popular with Tory members, and that Tom Tugendhat, the former Security Minister, is the most popular with normal people. Tim, are you leaning in any particular direction? Have you got any views on where we are with this interminable leadership contest? It's going to take 2.5 months.
I have. Drum roll, please, Ed, as I make my announcement. No, I've been a fan of Tom Tugendhat for a very long time. For me, it's a personal commitment as much as anything. Tom is a friend. I think you know, Ed, I had some pretty serious mental health problems during the lockdown, and Tom was just a really good friend to me. And what Libby said, a few minutes ago about the dishonesty of the Conservative Party when we were in government, I don't think the people rejected conservatism at the last election. I think the British people are at least relatively conservative with a small c. I think what they rejected was a certain stench associated with the Conservative Party. We did not look like good people. We did not behave well towards each other, and we did not behave well often in office. And so Tom is probably a little bit more to the left of me than some of the other candidates. I'm probably closer
most people are,
someone
Tim.
like... Pardon?
Most people are, Tim.
Oh, you naughty boy. But I think it matters that we have a good person at the top of the party, someone who basically the country can look at and see a decent man. And so Tom, for me, is my choice in this election.
Excellent. Well, that is breaking news. Tim Montgomerie, the founder of Conservative Home, is backing Tom Tugendhat for the Tory leadership election. Libby Purvis, you may not have strong views.
I'm not sure it's the kindest thing that Monty could do is to recommend to his friend, is to recommend him, because the old wisdom seems to be in the Conservative Party that whoever gets the job will not last long and will get shuffled out in contumely next time a few by-elections go wrong. We've lost some good talent that way, like William Hague. I'm interested in the fact that Kemi Badenoch only comes third with people across the country, because I would have thought she was the cleverest and the bravest. But what cheers me up is I always had a dark suspicion when the party in the country preferred Liz Truss. I had a slight worry as to whether possibly Rishi Sunak was a bit too brown for them. But now, if their absolute favourite is Cleverly, that's great. I remove this sort of dark slur at the back of my mind of latent racism in the wider Conservative Party. It's clearly not true.
You're both being naughty. One thing, I don't take much stock in these opinion polls, to be honest, Ed. You remember, we're both old enough to remember the David Davis leadership race. And the thing that mattered really then were the focus groups, because most voters don't know who Tom Tugendhat is. They don't know who Robert Jenrick is. They don't really know who James Cleverly is. What matters is running a focus group, seeing those people perform and getting voters to react to that. And that was what did a great job for David Cameron. I remember Tobias Ellwood and other supporters of David Cameron putting sort of copies of a Newsnight focus group under the doors of people in the hotel at the party conference, because David Cameron, when voters saw him, they liked him a lot more than David Davis. And I think that's what will determine this Tory leadership race is, some live events where we see these candidates actually performing, because frankly, people don't know who the candidates are really at the moment.
I that's so interesting. But Libby, what Tim said earlier about to a certain extent, he basically said there's everything to play for the Tory party. And I may be biased, but I feel that as well. I feel that a well-run Conservative Party could put itself back in the running, not necessarily to win the next election, but certainly to be a credible and effective opposition. Do you think that?
We're desperate for a decent opposition. I mean, this was exactly the same last time round. You know, when the Labour Party was in its craziest phase. You know, we just say, look, we just need a good opposition. You know, we need a good opposition here. And yes, it's an absolutely vital role, an intelligent and focused and united and interesting opposition, which genuinely puts forward different ideas. You know, and picks up on a policy. I mean, I think Ken Clarke's absolutely right when he says that he hopes the choice between candidates will be a choice between people's different policies and attitudes, rather than getting into some kind of American-style slanging match.
It's a very good point that Tim Montgomerie and Ken Clarke are now backing Tom Tugendhat. So maybe he is the man to unite the Conservative Party.
And government plans to redefine extremism this week. 3 former Home Secretaries, two former Home Secretaries, have criticised the government this week for not having consensus on this issue. Is that fair, do you think?
Sorry, that's not quite what they said, just to be clear. They're just being cautious about politicising it, but I don't know.
Well, I think they feel that the government might be politicising this issue and they're not taking the right approach in redefining extremism.
So they're absolutely right that we mustn't politicise this issue, and that's exactly why we're not politicising it. What we're doing is we're working with communities across the United Kingdom to make sure that what we have is an offer that keeps the British people safe. Now, I made a speech on Friday about this. That was to a Labour and a Conservative think tank jointly organised project, so this is a bipartisan issue. What we've got to make sure is that we're setting out an agenda that keeps British people safe. And what we already do is we make sure that those who might be spreading hate in our universities, for example, maybe on a student visa, they don't have an automatic right to stay in the United Kingdom. If you spread hate in this country, you can be asked to leave. And we also already make sure that British government funding, public money, taxpayers' money, doesn't go to organisations that could be spreading extremism.
Their concern is that there is a cross-party consensus at the moment on what extremism is, and that might not be the case after this week. I mean, how important is it for you to ensure that cross-party consensus remains? Is that something that is essential for you when it comes to defining extremism?
What's essential for me is keeping the British people safe. That's the fundamental duty of government, and that's the first thing that I will do. I've also got a responsibility, we also have a responsibility, to be honest about the genuine threats that we face and how we deal with them. Bringing people together, that is also important, and that's why the government has set forward not just the support for the Jewish community, about £70 million over coming years, which the Prime Minister set out, but £117 million for the Muslim community in various different ways over coming years as well.
But if you can't get the two main parties in this country to agree on what extremism is, surely that undermines efforts to keep people safe.
I think the fundamental thing when you're trying to keep people safe is you make sure you deal with those who propagate hatred, who try to spread hatred, and you make sure that where you can, you remove them from the country, and where you can't, you isolate them so that they are not receiving public money to advocate or spread hateful propaganda.
Okay, so you might go ahead and redefine extremism, even if Labour don't agree with you on
Look, I'm very keen that we work together across all parts of the United Kingdom. I think it's really important that we get communities together across the United Kingdom. But there isn't one party who's the gatekeeper here. There isn't one party that represents one side and one truth. The reality here is that we must do what we can to protect the British people. And as the government, we have that responsibility.
Okay. You talked about the £117 million you're giving to Muslim schools and protecting community groups. Why is the anti-Muslim hatred advisor quit before he's even started his role?
So my understanding is that he wasn't appointed, but let me just start off by saying I think Fiaz Mughal has done some fantastic work with Tel Mama, and I think he's an enormously impressive individual. But one of the things that he said, which I think is incredibly important, is how much Islamist propaganda against him there has been. And that's worth focusing on, because the truth is that the Islamists, that's not Muslims, but Islamists, extremists who are preaching a hateful, isolationist theology, are trying to say that Muslims like Fiaz do not have a part in the United Kingdom. Now, that's complete rubbish. Today, of all days, when many people across the United Kingdom are celebrating the holy month, the first day of the holy month of Ramadan, it's important that we say to our Muslim fellow citizens, of course you're here, of course you're part of British society, of course you're part of our communities. And it's absolutely important that in order to defend people, we isolate and we reject those who would call them other or would call them separate.